Considering the unprecedented global extent and destruction of World War II, it is difficult to imagine how some countries managed to stay neutral. This is especially true for Switzerland, which found itself in the heart of Europe surrounded by belligerent nations. Through staunch neutrality and cunning diplomacy, Switzerland managed to discourage a full-scale Axis invasion. A critical element of Switzerland's role in World War II is the assistance they provided to Jewish refugees, which the government has received both praise and contempt over. Not long after World War I, in 1923, Benito Mussolini's fascist party rose to power in Italy. Being a revolutionary leader, Mussolini and his striking nationalistic rhetoric alarmed Swiss leaders, namely because it called for the unification of all Italian peoples. The problem was that there was a large Italian minority living in Switzerland. To combat Mussolini's aggression and increase Swiss patriotism, Switzerland declared Romansh, a local Swiss language, to be the fourth national language of Switzerland. The issue of Italian irredentism foreshadowed greater concerns that would come a decade later, when Hitler created a dictatorship in Germany in 1933. Hitler, too, had plans of uniting all Germans into one nation while simultaneously kicking out all peoples he deemed inferior. When Germany annexed Austria in 1938 to unite the two German-speaking populations, fears arose in Switzerland that they would be next, as many Swiss spoke German. By the war's start in September 1939, Switzerland had completed extensive preparations. A total of 430,000 men served as active soldiers, and another 200,000 were in the reserves. The patriotic Swiss culture meant that nearly everyone was prepared to hold out as the last continental bastion of democracy against Germany. Radio broadcasters, journalists, and playwrights universally denounced Nazism, and the Swiss radio was the only German-speaking broadcasting service that opposed Nazi tyranny by exposing the atrocities they were committing against the Jews. During the Battle of France in May and June of 1940, Switzerland prepared to defend against a possible German invasion by setting up roadblocks, pillboxes, and machine gun nests along the narrow mountain passes. Indeed, Germany had developed a plan to invade Switzerland, called Operation Tannenbaum, with the intention of skirting France's Maginot Line of defenses. The Swiss defense plan was called the National Redoubt, and it involved the withdrawal of the Swiss army to the central mountainous region. This meant that Switzerland's second largest city, Geneva, would have to be surrendered. The fact that any attacking army would have been forced to move through narrow mountain passes would have made it easy for Swiss defenses to concentrate their fire and halt the invader. The plan ordered the destruction of any infrastructure that would have fallen into enemy hands. Germany and Italy's main concern was to obtain the Swiss rail system in order to transport goods between the countries. The destruction of numerous mountain tunnels and bridges would have delayed logistics for countless months, ensuring that any invading force would not reach the central region of Switzerland. The fact of the matter was that Germany and Italy had larger aspirations than invading Switzerland, not to mention the repulsive, nightmarish alpine terrain and the Swiss determination to fight, and were more keen on negotiating with Switzerland rather than conquering it. Still, numerous dogfights occurred between German and Swiss planes during the Battle of France in 1940. Determined to uphold their territorial integrity and discourage a German invasion, Swiss fighter pilots put up a dogged resistance, downing numerous German planes. But, due to fears of the situation escalating into an invasion, Switzerland backed down and allowed Germany to use their airspace. To enhance food production for the war, Switzerland turned a good portion of their land, much of which was unsuitable for agriculture due to the alpine climate, into capable farmland. They had learned of the food shortages and high prices that accompanied the First World War, so they made sure to introduce rationing and price regulations in 1939. Switzerland was economically dependent on Germany, and had been throughout the interwar years. Its domestic industries had been heavily strained, especially its valuable tourism and finance industries, which suffered during the war. Still feeling the effects of the Great Depression, Switzerland was forced to trade with Germany and Italy in exchange for its independence. Switzerland imported roughly 40% of its energy needs from Germany, and allowed goods to be transferred from Germany to Italy on Swiss railroads. 50% of all Switzerland's exports went to Germany and Italy. Critically, the Swiss had negotiated a deal with Germany that allowed them to use the French port of Marseille to export goods to the rest of the world, including the Allies. It was important that Swiss workers cooperated and worked during a time of war, so unions and industrialists made an agreement to negotiate when they had disputes rather than to strike. The time from June 1940 to June 1943 was uneventful for Switzerland due to not much fighting going on around them. When the British and Americans began their massive strategic bombing campaign against Germany in June of 1943, Switzerland was unwillingly pulled into the fighting. Due to vigorous German air defenses, Allied aircraft often became heavily damaged over the continent and were unable to make it back to their bases in Britain in time. So, many Allied aircrews opted to land in neutral Switzerland to evade capture, where they would be interned for the rest of the war. In other instances, German and Italian soldiers sometimes defected to Switzerland, especially towards the end of the war. In earlier years, Swiss border guards would often refuse entry to defecting soldiers so as not to damage their relationship with Germany and Italy. According to the Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907, which outlined the rules of war, all soldiers were required to remain interned in the neutral country until the end of the fighting. The Swiss set up an internment camp in Adelboden for French, British, American, Czech, Polish, German, and Italian soldiers. These camps were set up in the mountains, in the hopes that the harsh terrain would deter any attempts at escape. Over 100,000 soldiers, POWs, and deserters came to Switzerland during the war, and they were employed as laborers to replace the Swiss men that had been mobilized. In total, crews of about 100 Allied aircraft landed in Switzerland to evade capture. Despite the threat of being imprisoned if they were caught leaving the internment camps, many American airmen attempted to return back to Allied lines once France had been liberated. These airmen were aided by the fact that the American military attaché to Switzerland had set up networks that included safe houses and guides for American internees to use to escape Switzerland and return to the front lines. Just as they had told the Germans, the Swiss warned the Allies that any move through Switzerland would be met with resistance. During the Allied strategic bomber campaign, Switzerland was mistakenly bombed on numerous occasions by lost Allied aircraft. Over 6,000 Allied aircraft violated Swiss airspace during the war, 100 Swiss civilians were killed, and hundreds more were injured by these bombing raids. After the war, the United States agreed to pay reparations to Switzerland equal to $222 million in today's currency for the damage. As one of the last neutral democratic states in Europe, immigration to Switzerland was incredibly sought out by European Jews to avoid Nazi occupation. Switzerland's situation regarding Jewish refugees is interesting. When the anti-Semitic Nazis came to power in 1933, Jewish immigration to Switzerland increased. When Germany annexed Austria in 1938, Switzerland experienced another wave of Jewish immigrants. Switzerland's precarious situation can be realized when they rejected asylum to many Jews during the war to appease Germany. They believed that accepting Jewish refugees escaping the final solution would provoke Germany, and the Swiss were trying to avoid war. They began appeasing the Germans in 1938. An infamous agreement between Switzerland and Germany was made in which all passports belonging to German Jews would be marked with a large J, so Swiss authorities could recognize Jews and turn them away. This signified how Switzerland needed to appease Germany to maintain peace. Throughout the war, Switzerland accepted 180,000 civilian refugees, of which 30,000 were Jewish, and 100,000 military refugees. Many snuck into Switzerland to avoid Nazi tyranny. When Germany began deporting French Jews to Switzerland in 1942, Switzerland closed its borders. This was met by protest from the Swiss people, who ordered the government to accept some refugees, such as women and children. Some Swiss disliked refugees, while others supported them, and there were many organizations that facilitated immigration. Some industrialists welcomed them as a means to get more workers in the difficult economic conditions of the war. In 1944, Switzerland accepted a German offer to deport a few thousand Jews from Germany to Switzerland, and they accepted, saving them from the death camps. In other instances, though, Jews were denied entry. Another important note to make is on the Swiss involvement in storing German wealth in their banks, most of which was illegally obtained. Although theoretically neutral, the Swiss bank disproportionately aided the Germans in their discrimination of Jews. The Germans had deposited large quantities of gold in Swiss banks, most of which had been obtained from the victims of the Holocaust through mass looting. After the war, the Swiss banks struggled with what to do with the gold, as most of their rightful owners had been killed. In sum, being surrounded by Axis powers, Switzerland was in an unfortunate position during World War II. Their economic dependence on Germany made it very difficult for the Swiss to make large attempts at resistance. Soldiers on both sides of the conflict were interned by Switzerland, and some managed to escape despite the harsh alpine terrain. Switzerland was a haven for Jewish refugees from Europe, but still, many were denied entry.